welcome back to COAGG Conversations. I'm your host, Cutie, and today in our Women Make It Game series, we have the lovely Jennifer from Janbeh Games. Welcome in.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being awake at this time and chatting at this time because Jennifer is all the way in California. So if we have any listeners from California, you've got a resident Californian on the podcast. So yeah, again, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
It's very exciting to have women who make games, who are game devs. What is exactly your position in the studio?
So for the current thing that I'm working on, it's called GHOSTIE, and I am the founder of the studio. And currently, I guess.
Yes, thank you. I love that. We love to see that. Amazing.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, I just call it the lead developer because it's like I cover a lot of roles. So it's tough because like I'm the programmer, but I'm also like doing, a lot of like the UI UX stuff and then like some of the writing too. So it's just kind of like all over the place. So I just say lead developer / founder.
Okay. Fantastic. That's amazing. Well done. It is. I don't think people actually understand the amount of effort that goes into getting a game from an idea, from a bunch of scribbles, drawings, to an actual playable, even a demo.
Right.
It is such an incredible feat. So well done to you.
Thank you.
Love GHOSTIE. If you haven't heard of it, it is cute AF. Okay. It is like the cutest little, so cute. I love it. They share on I've seen them on Twitter, the cutest little characters you have ever seen in your life. I'm so here for it. What is the purpose of the game? What is the inspiration behind the game?
So I guess as a quick like summary of GHOSTIE, you play as a ghost matchmaker, and your job is basically to set up couples in this manor that you live in. You live in the attic, and you have residents that live in it, and then you're just kind of shipping them. And the thing is that you can ship any couple that you want. And so the inspiration of it actually came from Fire Emblem, which I'm not sure if you're familiar as much with Fire Emblem, but Fire Emblem is actually like a Japanese like tactical RPG game, and a big part of Fire Emblem's, I guess, culture or like fandom is that there are a lot of characters that you can like ship, and you can, I guess, kind of matchmake in that sense. So like the main player can also date, some of the characters, but I think something that is unique in it is that the side characters can also have like relationship endings, or they can get married or whatever. And so for GHOSTIE, that's actually kind of where the inspiration came from, where when I would play Fire Emblem, I would kind of grind the battles just to get the relationships up for the characters. And I didn't really care as much about the battles, even though that's like the main point of the game. And that's like such a big part of the community too. Like if you look on the subreddits of it, it's always like, who's your favorite couple? Like, who do you like the most? Which character do you like the most? And so for me, I loved talking about that. And then I was like, hey, what if there's a game that you do play as a matchmaker, and then people can just ship whoever they want? And because that's also the thing in Fire Emblem too, is not all, you can't always ship every single couple with everyone. So there are like kind of set people. And then for us, we were like, well, if we're going to make this a matchmaking game, we should just have it open to everyone.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, that's what we decided to do.
That's so cute. So how do you win? How do we win GHOSTIE?
So the game will end whenever you ship, I guess, all the couples. And so we're going to have 12 characters. So that would be 6 couples. And so that will be like, I guess, a playthrough of GHOSTIE. But we do plan to have kind of like new game plus runs so that you can like play it again. Because there are a lot of like because there are a lot of combinations, a lot of people will
Mhm.
want to ship them with multiple characters. And
Yeah,
so we want to
yeah.
kind of like make it easier to play like a second playthrough or a third playthrough just so you can kind of see all the combinations or however many you want.
Okay. And are the residents, they're not procedurally generated, they're fixed and they all have their own story within the game. Are you able to choose their pronouns or their gender, or are they fixed as well?
So they're all fixed. So they all have their genders and pronouns, and they all have like very distinct personalities.
Hmm.
I think that was a big decision point for us too for Love Ghosty was like, do we want to have, yeah, like procedurally generated characters that you could, kind of infinitely play?
Hmm.
Or we were thinking about having really, really distinct characters that were like very, very unique. And we decided to go that route because similar to Fire Emblem, like each of the characters are very, very unique and like they have very interesting dynamics between them.
Hmm.
And because they have such strong personalities, it's kind of like nice to see like what their dynamic would be if they got to like be in a relationship or like how they interacted. And so that's kind of what we wanted to do as well was like if you take this like really peppy character and then this really like emo character, like what will happen when they like have to do something together. Um and so yeah, that's what we wanted to do. And so even though it's not procedurally generated, it's not going to be like infinite combinations. We tried to
Yeah.
make it as much as possible. So having 12 characters means there's 66 combinations, which
Hmm.
it kind of doesn't sound like a lot, but when you kind of start to play it and you see how many there are, you're like, oh wow, this is actually kind of a lot.
Well, I can see that I've seen that you have released 10 of the characters. There's still two more to go. Well, I don't when do you think those other two will be released?
So I think I have. I think I have actually shown all of them by now. I know like social media kind of gets drowned out and stuff. But the last two characters, we have a tiger character and then we have an elephant
Okay.
character. Yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen those ones. So they're very honestly, the even just so far, like there's a robot, there's like a frog, like there's just like that amount of variation is just it's so whimsical and so lovely. Because if you, I guess you can kind of apply that to, even our own relationships and people that we're with romantically or friends, like humans are that unique as well. We just don't
Mhm.
always show it on the outside.
Yeah, exactly.
Who would you say is your favorite of
Oh,
the
that's
12?
so hard. That's so hard to say. From looks, this is very biased, but
Mhm.
I like the penguin character. Her name is
The penguin.
Wobbles.
Mhm.
But that's because I'm personally obsessed with penguins. Like I have been obsessed with penguins since I was a kid. So
Mhm.
that's kind of a very, very biased one. Um,
She's very
we,
tall compared to the other characters.
yeah, she is. We did want to make her a tall character, and the funny thing is that she's also a very clumsy character, and so kind of like a penguin in real life, like they kind of
Yeah.
just slip and fall and all of that. So we wanted to have that as her kind of part of her personality. Um, I do really like the elephant character that
Mhm.
is one of I think maybe probably the last one I revealed
Yeah.
because he's very like he has a very different way of viewing the world, I would say.
Mhm.
And so he doesn't quite understand other people don't quite understand him, but he's very silly, very goofy, but like not intentionally trying to be goofy, but he just ends up being a very goofy character and I really like him.
That's great. No, honestly, if you are listening and watching and you are interested in this game, I have all of the links down below. Check them out on Steam, wishlist it. There's a little demo you can play, which is absolutely adorable. You will have a fantastic time in Love Ghosty. And yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to its release next year. Um, Jennifer, I wonder if you could talk me through how your journey to becoming a lead developer, creating your very own video game. How did that come about?
Yeah, so it started quite a while back. When I was in school, in college, it I took a couple of game design classes back then. And that was kind of my first learning about game development, but also about like indie games in general. I think at that time, I didn't know what an indie game was or like what that meant at all. And like I had been playing games my entire life, but like always just the AAA big games. And so in college, like I learned about, you know, indie game development, and I had to make for both classes, I had to like make a game with a group of people. And it was the most fun I've ever had in any of my college courses. And it was almost bad to a point because I would spend so much time working on the game versus working on my like other projects. And so I was like, oh, but I just want to keep working on this game. It's so much more fun to work on this.
Yeah, wow.
And so then that was kind of like where I first got into game development. And then when I graduated, I decided to just go for a normal, like typical software engineering job. I did major in computer science. And so for me, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go for like a pretty stable software engineering job because I heard the game industry can be like, you know, very volatile and like, you know, uncertain. So I did that for a while, and then I was looking for a new job, and then I thought to myself like, oh, I kind of do want to get into game development. And so I ended up working for a mobile games company for 4 years. And during that time, I learned a ton about game development, especially in like the actual like industry versus like, you know, theoretical, like I did in my classes. And the really fortunate thing too is as a software engineer there, I actually got to work on a lot of like prototypes for new games. And because of that, I was like working on a bunch of different projects. So I kind of got to see from scratch, essentially, like how do I build a project? Like how do I, you know, try to limit it as much as possible, and like how to try to like ship something very like simple to test with. And I mean, that kind of is like the indie dev cycle in a way. And so it was like a very small team. Like I was like, for some of the projects, I was the only engineer. So it was very, very similar. And then during the pandemic, like I was just pretty stressed in general. I think a lot of people were also kind of like evaluating, you know, what's important to them during the pandemic. And so it was kind of the same for me too, where I was like, I do really like games, but I kind of want to like, you know, I'm stressed, I'm like tired, like all this stuff. And I was like, I kind of just want to take a break. And so I ended up quitting. And then I was thinking to myself, you know, like I've always wanted to do indie game like development, and like maybe this is the time to try it out. And so then I was like, okay, like let me try it out, let me see how it is. And then that's kind of how Love Ghostie started. And I was like, you know what, I guess I'll just try to do this for real. And here I am now.
Wow, what an incredible journey. And I think it's always interesting because I've heard both kind of sides of the coin when it comes to, I've been a lifelong gamer. I found a way to make some skills from gaming be a stable career, and then I made a game on the side. And then there are other devs that have come from the point of, you know, I studied archaeology, I studied history, and I really love storytelling. And then I realized that games are a really powerful storytelling mechanism. So then I was like, hey, I'm going to make a video game about this. It's really, really interesting to hear that about you. So you played video games your whole life. What was the first video game that you ever played?
Oh man, that's such a hard question. I think I saw someone asking that on Twitter or something, and then I was trying to think to myself like, what was the first game I played, because I don't really remember. Mostly because so I have two older brothers, and they played a lot of video games, and so a lot of my childhood too was watching them play games.
I'm
so
so
sometimes
sorry.
like
I'm so sorry. I was me myself. I grew up. I was the eldest, and I had two younger brothers. But I tell you, it was the same experience. Even like that. It was like I was always either watching them or my guy friends play video games. It's crazy. Growing up. So what kind of games did they like to play?
So they played a lot of JRPGs. So like
Yeah,
they were really
okay,
into Final
great.
Fantasy.
Yeah,
And so I would
yeah.
watch, so I got really into Final Fantasy because of that. They played a lot of like racing games, and I mean sports games were always kind of big back then too. So they
Yeah,
did play some
yeah.
sports games. They were really into yeah, I would say mostly RPGs, like, and they would play
Mhm.
a lot of Mario and stuff like that too.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's funny because that's why it's so blurred to me because I can't remember if it was something I watched or if I actually played
You played
myself.
it.
Yeah. And I know like when I was really young, my brothers would do the thing where they would give me a controller, but it wasn't actually like plugged in. so,
Okay.
so then they're like, "Oh, she's playing with us, like she's having fun, but she's not actually contributing to it." It's
Look,
definitely like an older sibling thing.
I don't know if kids have gotten smarter, but I've tried to do that with my children because I have a
Mhm.
4-year-old and a 7-year-old. I tried it with the 4-year-old when because her older sister is she's a bit more proficient, and they just get up
Mhm.
like they get into
Right.
arguments with each other if she does the wrong thing. So I just gave
Right.
her one that didn't have any batteries, and she was not happy. She knew
Oh,
immediately that it wasn't working. She's like, yeah, and this was last year. So I feel like maybe we've gotten our children are more smart now
yeah.
because
Yeah, it seems
that
like it.
doesn't fly like it used to.
Yeah, it seems like it. That's so
Oh my
funny.
goodness. Okay, so okay, so when you could, I don't know, maybe you had your own console or like the first game you ever like purchased or asked your like caregivers for, like what what was it?
Yeah,
What really
I
got
feel
you?
like the earliest memory I have is probably playing on a Game Boy Color, because in that
Oh,
case, I did have my own.
yeah, beautiful.
So Pokemon Gold was actually probably the one I
Yeah.
remember very, very clearly.
No, fantastic. Yeah, you know what? I wish that we had more modern Game Boys. I would adore that. Like I know obviously we have like Steam Decks and
Mhm.
you know all that kind of stuff, but I just yeah, there was nothing more quintessential and more perfect than that shape, that size screen, those size buttons. It's
Right,
so classic.
right.
You don't still have it, do you?
I do actually. I found it. Yeah. I
Amazing.
I found it a couple of Christmases ago because I went to my parents' house and they were just like cleaning out stuff and they're like, just
Okay.
take whatever you want. And then I found my old Game Boy Color. I found like a Game Boy like Advance, like the
Oh,
SP, the one that flips open.
beautiful.
And I was like, oh, I'm taking all of these.
Yeah. Oh, that's so special. Now, we did have a retro gaming collector on a COAGG podcast, and she said, make sure when you store them, take the batteries out.
Oh yeah.
Um, so if you are storing them and you're not using them, take the batteries out so they don't
Okay.
explode in the back of it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you'll wreck it.
Yeah.
So yeah, hot tip for you
Good
for
to
your
know.
Game Boy.
Yeah, luckily mine didn't have batteries in it, so I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
okay, cool.
fantastic.
It's just yeah."
You must have already known.
Yep. I
Awesome.
yes. Clearly, I remember to do that.
Clearly. Some people don't. So you kept gaming, and then obviously, your next minute you're in college and you're managing like studying and, gaming on the side. I guess like the projects that you worked on were the games that you played, I suppose. And plus any like, I guess, AAA that you really, really were into.
Yeah. I really did get into indie games like after that college period because
Mhm.
again, like growing up, I did mostly play like Final Fantasy or like Pokemon, Dragon
Mhm.
Quest, like the very, very big name stuff. But yeah, I think that just taking those college courses really opened my eyes to indie gaming in general
Mhm.
and like seeing how many different stories can be told that wouldn't normally be okay, I guess, in a triple A setting, or maybe not okay, but more like they're less likely to get approved or something like that because it doesn't appeal to like a large audience, something like that. So
Well, this indie cozy kind of uh, genre of gaming, I think it's very popular. Like I know it doesn't earn the big bucks like maybe Mario does, but I I really do think there are so many powerful and truly meaningful stories that can be written inside these indie games. And you are right. You can push the boundaries a little bit more. You can be a little bit more controversial. I mean, take I don't know if you've played it, Cult of the Lamb. That pushed so many boundaries. It has you are sacrificing these cute, fluffy little animals in your cult.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it just became, and next minute it's like really, really famous. And you know, that's just a small studio in Melbourne that made that. And it's so wild that I think if maybe just the right amount of traction, the right amount of attention for an indie game was given, I think these stories would actually be a lot more popular, and they would speak to a lot of people, to be honest. And it's really awesome that you've noticed that, and you've been passionate enough to stick with that throughout your career.
Yeah, that's definitely something we kind of saw again with Love Ghostie too, because we were kind of targeting these people who are maybe fans of Fire Emblem and who like want to ship and who are very into romance. Like we kind of knew that our game was going to be very niche in that sense. But something that actually really surprised me was, since the demo, like we released a public demo, we found out that it's not as niche as we thought it would be, I guess. Where a lot of people who like, because so what I do is, like, if someone streams the game, I'll usually background it, like, you know, like I'll watch the VOD or something and I'll background it while I work. And there's a really surprising like amount of people who say like, I didn't think I was going to be into this game because I'm not into dating sims. I don't like romance games or anything like that. But I had a lot of fun playing this. And I'm like, it makes me so happy to hear that, because
that's great.
I'm kind of creating like a romance game for or I guess, like for a wider audience, I guess, in that sense. And it's really nice to hear, because I thought we were just, I thought we had a very niche group of people, but it seems like, a lot of others are enjoying it, and that, that makes me really happy.
It's really great that you're noticing that as well, because I think probably the best feedback, most valuable feedback, is from people downloading the demo, you actually going out, accessing their content, and then, because at the end of the day, like, that's who you're catering to, the people who actually want to play the game. But I think, I don't know, it must be like their friend might have told them about it. Like, I wonder how people find out about a game without, if they're not a dating sim gamer.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's probably word of mouth. Because I honestly don't know otherwise how they would really know, besides I guess browsing through Steam.
Sure.
I mean, I guess I know, like, if you have friends on Steam, like, you'll see what they're playing, so you might be like, oh, I'll check it out, like that could happen. But then I guess that's similar to like word of mouth. So yeah, that's probably, I would assume that's how it works. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's hard.
You know what? Marketing is very, very hard, for sure. Across everything. So how many people are on your team? How many people do you manage in the studio?
So for full-time, it's just me and the art director. So she's a good friend of mine. So it's just us full-time, and then we have a couple of contractors who are helping out with like music, sound effects, stuff like that. So yeah, we're very, very small. Very small. So I do all the marketing, and for someone who knows nothing about marketing, it's tough. It's very, very tough.
It's because I mean, you are thinking about, like, obviously the kind of vision that you want, the story that you want to tell gamers, but then you're dealing with algorithms, you're dealing with trends, and sometimes those don't always like meet with what you want to put out there.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's tough because for a while at the beginning of the development cycle, I was using a lot of TikTok, and that helped a lot, I think, for initially. But then at some point, I just stopped making TikToks and just haven't gone back because it's just
Oh,
so much effort, and I
yeah.
was like, "I'm just tired. I need to focus on, like, working on the game itself," and,
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
very hard.
That's a lot of companies I've seen, like even like smaller dev teams do actually hire someone who just
Mhm,
does that. They're like, here's all the stuff we made, or here's a stream that's streaming it, or whatever, and you just throw it at them, and they do something with it, and that's all they
mhm.
do. They don't have to worry about the ins and outs of any bugs or anything that
Right,
comes
right,
up.
exactly.
Oh, you know what? I think keeping it small is a good idea, but it's also a challenge.
Mhm.
Um, and I can imagine. I've never made a game. I've only spoken to people who make games, and this is always a different answer. But what kind of challenges do you feel that you face personally as a game developer?
Um, there's a lot. I think as an indie dev especially, it's just covering so many roles that I'm not familiar with. So
Hmm.
for me, like I felt very or like I still feel very confident about like my role as like a software engineer and like being able to
Yeah,
program the game. I feel very
yeah.
confident about that because I
Hmm.
have like, almost I guess 10 years of experience at this point at it. But
Hmm.
when when it comes to marketing, social media, when it comes to like any sort of community management stuff or like even UI, like it takes me
Hmm.
so much time to make a menu because I just iterate and iterate and iterate on it. And I'm sure if someone who is, experienced in that, it would take them like a fraction of the time to do what I was trying to do. And so I think it is just like covering all these roles is very difficult because
Mm.
you may not have experience in it. So it's a lot of research. It's a lot of looking at other games to see, what they've done, to see what works, what doesn't work. I do a lot of like research on like playing other people's games and demos and stuff and seeing like kind of
Hmm.
taking parts that I like, stuff like that. So it is just like there's so much to do, I guess, and there's
Yeah.
so with limited time and resources, it's just gonna take a while. And I think that's one thing that like always makes me feel bad is that when people are like, "Oh, I'm so excited to play, like, when is it coming out?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm trying. I'm trying my best."
Every
You know?
day I dream
Yeah,
about putting this game out.
yeah,
Because I
everyone's
mean,
like
at the
yeah,
end of the day,
everyone's always like, "Oh, I can't wait for release." I was like, "Oh, me too, like, don't worry." Like,
me too.
same boat.
And I think, like, I mean, it's not it is an end goal. It's not like obviously the end of the development cycle, but it's, like you want a fully fleshed out game that people can play from beginning to end, and then you can, obviously add on to it or whatever you plan on doing. And and plus, like, how else do you get money? Like you need, like that's another thing as well. I think you know, I I'm very very mindful about putting pressure on devs because you don't know who sees what, so when
Mhm,
you do make a comment like, oh, I can't believe this isn't out yet, or it might be quite flippant. I personally try not to comment on the development cycle because things come up, and you know what,
mhm,
most of the time, like 9 times out of 10, people are making their game alongside working full time,
mhm,
alongside looking after their family, or that whatever the dynamic in their life is.
right,
This is rarely a full-time thing,
mhm,
unless you get, so Australia at the moment, so Screen West, or Screen Australia, is, I think they're taking more of an interest. So this is the government, right?
mm,
They're
mhm,
taking more interest in gaming as an actual form of entertainment. So they're putting it
mm,
in line with film and music, art,
mhm,
because obviously it kind of meshes all of those
mhm,
things together,
yeah,
which is why gaming is such a powerful storytelling tool, in my
mhm,
opinion.
yeah,
And so now you can go ahead and you can apply for these grants. Mind
mhm,
you, it doesn't pay for everything, but it's a really fantastic way for people to just, get off the ground.
right,
Is
right.
that are you guys self-funded? Are there kind of initiatives in America for indie game developers?
Not that I know of, unfortunately.
Right.
I think it depends on the state, but then even California, I think there's just too many. Like, there's a lot of like game developers here and
Right.
stuff like that. So unfortunately, not really. Um, but yeah, for us, we're self-funded.
Okay.
As of right now, like basically, fortunately, as a software engineer, I've been able to like make, a decent amount
Yeah.
and like save
Yeah.
that. So that was also like a consideration for me whenever
Of
I was
course.
quitting. I was like thinking about, you know, I don't want to feel like pressured, by
Mm.
like money and like, because I know that can happen too with some game releases where, you're kind of running out of money and you just need to like ship something like
Yeah, yeah.
quickly. And for me, it's like because this is also such a huge passion project, I was like, I really want to be able to make sure that I
Mm.
have time to, develop it and like, give me the time and space that I need. Um, but yeah, like I have heard that there are like funds out there to like apply for, and like there's always like
Mhm.
the publisher route or the Kickstarter route. So there are
Yeah,
definitely like things that I can look at too if it comes to that.
if you needed to.
Yeah.
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 I think that for me, if I was gonna make a game, that would probably be, like, the biggest thing because, like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people and, well, from my experience, whenever I say a lot of people, a lot of people I've encountered, m more often than not, they've created a game in college or university,
Mhm.
wherever they've attended, and then sometimes they'll take it out and they'll continue to refine it, and then they're still working with those same people, but then yeah, like I said, most of the time they have those side jobs. But well done to you
Mhm.
for having the foresight and saying, you know what, I do want to make a game one day, and I need to, I won't buy that extra coffee this week. I'll put it
Yeah.
in my I'll put it in my Love Ghosty fund.
Yeah. Yeah. For the future indie game fund.
Yeah. That's a fantastic. Is your how have you found like being a chick in this industry? Like be look, I don't know what it's like in America, but in the software engineering departments of every university school that I have seen, I dare say there's not that many. How's it been for you?
Um, it's it's been a little iffy. I would also say like in my like college classes, I think it
Yeah.
was like 20% women or something like that. Like
Okay.
which is kind
Okay.
of actually higher
Yeah,
compared
that
to other
feels
schools.
like
Yeah.
'cause they realize that software engineers get paid quite a bit. They can earn bank from being a
Yeah,
software
exactly,
engineer.
exactly, exactly.
For sure.
Um, for the company that I worked for the mobile games company, it was actually
Mhm.
a little bit somewhat more balanced. And I
Okay,
think
that's
a
cool.
part of that is because one of the games that they develop is kind of more targeted towards like young adult females and like women.
Okay.
And so I think that kind of helped balance a little bit of the gender between like
Mhm.
like all disciplines, honestly. So like writers and like
Yep.
software engineers and all that stuff. Um, so for my experience, like it's probably been better than most, to be honest. And I think the casual kind of mobile game industry in general tends to be a little bit more balanced in terms of their
Mhm.
target audiences as well. Um,
Interesting.
Mostly because I've heard horror stories of like AAA studios where, like there's a lot
Yeah.
of like issues with women and like sexual harassment and that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
fortunately, I haven't had to deal with that. Um, but I think just being a woman in software engineering and in the game industry, it's it's this interesting space where I feel like you always kind of have to prove yourself in a way. And I feel like this is kind of the case of being a gamer as well, like a girl
Mhm.
gamer. I mean, I know growing up a lot of times if you tell someone that you play games, they're like, "Oh, what kind of games?"
Oh,
And like you
okay.
have to like kind of yeah, you have to like prove yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
There's always
No,
kind
you're
of like
so
a little
right.
bit of judgment there, like of
Yeah.
like whatever you say, like is that a real game or not? And I know like cozy games often get this too of like, oh, that's not a real game, but like we don't have to go into that.
I remember
um,
how many years has Stardew Valley been going? Sorry?
yeah, I know exactly. exactly. And like Animal Crossing too,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's wild. Um, but yeah, like I think that's kind of a similar thing that like women software engineers and women in game development often have to go through too. Like it's a lot of having to kind of prove yourself that you like worth it, like you're supposed to be there, and it shouldn't be that way because that doesn't happen to men in the same
No.
positions. And so it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's always quite underlying. Like it's not necessary. They haven't said it outwardly that, oh, you're not good enough because you play this game or you make this game or you've
Hmm.
only worked on X amount of games or you're, only in a certain role. But it's very under the surface. It's never explicit, unfortunately.
Right.
Well, for gamer girls who put themselves out there in social media, they probably do get do get it for sure. I think
Yeah.
I personally I experienced that quite a bit when I was on another podcast. The whole panel was male, a lot of our guests
Mm.
were male. Um, and yeah, it did feel like I was constantly trying to prove myself and prove almost like my street cred
Mm.
of being a gamer. Like if I didn't
Yeah.
play, what do you mean you didn't play that game? Like, oh, or
Yeah.
what do you or it's you didn't finish that game, or you didn't like
Oh.
100% it, or you didn't get all of the achievements, or you're like, what's your gamer score? Like, honestly, like, I have a real life, right? I am a gamer and I game when I can. So when I
Hmm.
say I'm a gamer, when I have my free time, I play
Right.
games. I try not to, depending on how good the game is, really. Um, I don't sacrifice my real life to play
Right.
games. No,
Hmm.
no one should do that.
Right.
So I think probably it's got something to do with people's priorities.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think that whole situation needs to change because it shouldn't
Hmm.
matter what game you play or how long you've played that game or what game you're
Right.
developing. I don't think it should matter, to be
Right.
honest.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why we're having these conversations, because
Hmm.
if other women are feeling that and they're hearing this, it's like, well, maybe it doesn't actually matter. Because 48% of gamers identify as women.
Hmm.
So yeah, maybe we
Yeah.
should be listening to this side, not that side sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It is wild to me that even today people, don't think there are that many like women gamers. But yeah, that statistic, it's just like there's so many of us. It's like a very
Yeah,
common thing nowadays. And like a
for
lot
sure.
of my friends are gamers and like it's
Yeah.
totally normal.
Yeah. And I think who was I talking to? It was at a convention. I think you have it in America. It's called South by Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the first one ever in Sydney this year, and I was lucky enough to attend it. And they have the different the different badges. So there's like games, music,
Mm-hmm.
tech, all that stuff. And we were at like there was like a gaming mixer that we had, and there was a woman there. She didn't have a tag on, but I was going around like just having impromptu interviews with people, and she's like, "Oh, I'm not a gamer." And then like her friends were like, "You've played Pokemon. You like Pokemon?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh yeah, I guess." And then she's like, uh, "Oh, we did buy a Switch, so I could play Overcooked with my husband." And I was like, "Babe, I'm sorry to break the news to you, but that is a gamer."
Yeah.
It
Yep.
was yeah, it's a great time. It really is. And she was in the tech industry. I don't know what she did, but yeah, she's uh, very high up in the tech industry. So
Mm.
it's just, yeah, it's such a shame. But I think, that's why I try and do this.
Mhm. Yeah, I
um
really appreciate it.
no, and I appreciate you doing your thing. You do your thing so I can do my thing, and then we can all like do our thing together, and we all raise each other up. And
Mhm.
that's what the in my mind, the sisterhood of gaming really, really is. And yeah, I didn't think I would get this passionate about it until I actually started talking to people, and people were so happy to share their journeys and to just help inform and I guess entertain other women, other people in the industry. And I think the more that people can do that, the better. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Thank you, Jennifer. I went on a big, long tangent. Okay, so to kind of close this off, is there anything that you want to say to, or advice that you want to give female game developers out there, whether they've started developing a game or they are thinking about developing a game?
There's a lot.
I'm
trying to think of like one thing. I think the biggest thing, especially for, women game developers, is to kind of find a community that you can feel comfortable enough to chat about like questions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because for me, like, I don't know if this is, because I'm like a woman in like mostly dominantly male like industries, it can be hard for me to sometimes ask for help and ask for questions, because again, it's coming from that place of like, I don't want to be judged for not knowing this thing. And it's probably a common question that I have, but it's just that kind of internal fear of, being told that I don't belong here. So like, I don't want to make it seem like
you don't know every little thing.
Exactly. And like, that's perfectly normal. And like, I wish I could have told myself that when I was like first joining the industry. And so I think that's probably something, like, find people, like, reach out to people on Twitter. Like, I've met a lot of people on social media. I've met people through TikTok, and like all these people are like lovely, lovely developers. And like more often than not, they're like willing to help you out and like ask questions and just create that community. And, just don't be afraid to reach out to people if you need help.
Yeah, for sure. So you found most people on Twitter, or is there like a Reddit, or I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I think Reddit's also a good place. There are like a lot of game developer like related subreddits there.
Okay.
I would say like through social media, I have met like a lot of other developers, and the nice thing with that is that they'll be like, "Oh, hey, you should join our Discord," and then so like there's Discords that I've been invited to, and so it just all kind of like chain reaction goes from there. So it's just like reach out to people, like meet people, like be interested in their work, talk to them, exactly. Yeah. Like, you don't have to do solo, like, indie dev and just like, by yourself. Like, it's tough. It's really, really tough to do that. And so it's nice to be able to like, talk to others about it, ask about their experience, because there are people who are more experienced than you that like will help you out. And especially like for me, being like a woman, I know how tough it is. So like, if someone is getting into the industry, I would be happy to help them, because I'd be like, I was in your position before. I understand it's very terrifying.
What have we got?
Like,
where are we?
Like, here, I can help you. Exactly. And I think like, fostering that community would be good too, because then we can just have kind of a chain of people being open to being mentoring for other people who are new or like want to join the industry.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, more power to you, and more people need to be like you, have that mindset. But you know what? That doesn't come. Having that mindset doesn't come from just out of nowhere. Like you're very experienced. You know what it's like, and yeah, you know the importance of community when it comes to game development.
Yeah.
Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on COAGG Conversations and talking about your amazing game. All of the links for Jennifer will be in the description of this video. Thank you to all of our watchers on YouTube. Thank you to all of our listeners across the internet. And we will see you next time for another episode of COAGG Conversations.